The sun hung low over the desert, bleeding gold across the endless horizon. Dust swirled behind a lone wagon creaking down Dust Creek Road, its wheels groaning under the weight of supplies and hopes. The woman guiding the reins, Clara Hale, sat upright, her face calm but her eyes sharp, scanning the wide stretch of land that never promised safety. She'd been on the road 3 days now, moving west after her father's passing, determined to claim a small piece of land they'd dreamed about for years. She wasn't new to hard work, but the West didn't care how strong you were. It tested your soul day after day. The old mare pulling the wagon whinnied, restless, ears twitching to sounds Clara couldn't yet hear. The desert was too still, too quiet, the kind of silence that wasn't natural. She slowed the wagon, her hand hovering near the rifle resting beside her seat. Wind brushed through the dry sagebrush, whispering like a warning. Then came the faint echo of hoofbeats, distant at first, then closer, faster. Clara's pulse quickened. She looked back and saw 3 dark shapes cutting through the dust. Closing in, outlaws. Her father had warned her about men like these, the kind who prowled lonely roads looking for easy plunder. Clara's wagon, filled with provisions and tools, was worth more than gold to settlers. She flicked the reins and urged the horse forward. But the bandits' laughter carried through the wind. They were coming fast. Her hands trembled, but she gritted her teeth and forced the wagon onward, heart hammering. Within moments, the riders closed in, 3 rough men with weathered faces and hungry eyes. Their leader, a tall man with a black hat and a scar down his cheek, rode up beside the wagon, smirking. Now, ma'am," he drawled, his voice dripping with mock politeness. "You're a long way from town. Roads like this ain't safe for a lady traveling alone." Clara didn't answer. She kept her gaze ahead, knuckles white around the reins. "Tell you what," the outlaw continued. "We'll just take a look inside that wagon. You hand over what you've got, and maybe we'll let you keep your horse." The second outlaw, a younger man with a patchy beard, chuckled. "Maybe," he added cruelly. Clara's mind raced. She could reach for her rifle, but there were 3 of them and only 1 of her. Even if she managed to fire, she'd never outshoot all of them. But giving up wasn't in her blood. Her father's voice echoed in her memory. "If the day comes when you stand alone, don't stand down. Make them remember your name." She drew a slow breath and without a word pulled the wagon to a stop. The leader dismounted, boots crunching on the dry earth. "Smart lady," he said, taking a step closer. "Now why don't you be sweet and—" A sharp sound cut him off. The distant thunder of another horse, one riding fast. The outlaws turned their heads toward the ridge, squinting into the sun. A lone rider appeared on the horizon, dust trailing behind, him like smoke. The rider moved with purpose, steady, unflinching. As he drew nearer, the metallic glint of a revolver caught the light. The outlaws exchanged glances. "Who the hell's that?" the bearded one muttered. The stranger didn't answer. He rode closer until his horse's hooves thundered across the ground. Clara caught a glimpse of him, a man in a worn brown hat, his eyes hidden beneath its brim, his face shadowed but set with calm determination. A revolver hung loose in his right hand, the barrel gleaming. He stopped about 10 yards away, his voice low but carrying through the desert air like iron. "Step away from the wagon." The leader of the outlaws sneered. "You got no business here, cowboy." The stranger didn't move. His gaze flicked from one outlaw to the next. "I said, step away." For a long heartbeat, the desert held its breath. Then the leader laughed, spitting into the dirt. "Looks like we got ourselves a hero," he said. "Boys, let's teach him something about minding other folks' business." The outlaws reached for their guns. Clara gasped. Before she could blink, the stranger's revolver flashed, one shot then another, echoing through the canyon walls like thunder. The leader dropped first, clutching his chest. The second outlaw fired wildly and missed. The cowboy's bullet hit his hand, sending his gun spinning into the sand. The third turned his horse to flee, but the stranger's voice cut him down like a whip. "Tell your kind, this road's off limits." The outlaw didn't need to be told twice. He kicked his horse and vanished into the horizon. The gunfire faded into silence. Clara sat frozen, her breath shallow, her heart pounding. The stranger dismounted and approached slowly, holstering his revolver. He tipped his hat. "You all right, ma'am?" She nodded, still gripping the reins. I think so." He glanced at the fallen outlaws, his expression unreadable. "You were lucky," he said. "They don't usually talk before they shoot." "I wasn't feeling too lucky," she replied. her voice trembling despite her effort to sound steady. He gave a small smile, the first sign of softness in his hard features. "Name's Colt Avery," he said. "Was headed to the next town when I saw the dust trail. Figured trouble was brewing." Clara took a slow breath, finally letting the tension drain from her shoulders. "You figured right. I owe you my life." Colt shook his head. "Don't owe me a thing, miss. Just glad I got here in time." He knelt by the wagon, checking the horse and the wheel. "You traveling far?" "Red Rock Ridge," she said. "There's land there my father left me." Colt nodded. "That's a long road. Dangerous, too. Outlaws have been getting bold lately. You shouldn't be riding alone." "I don't have much of a choice," Clara said quietly. "A woman can't wait for the world to go easy." He looked at her then, really looked, and saw something fierce in her eyes, something that reminded him of the people who built the West. With nothing but grit and stubborn hope, he stood dusting his gloves. "Well," he said, "since I already made enemies today, might as well finish what I started. I'll ride with you till Red Rock." Clara hesitated. "You'd do that?" Colt gave a slight grin. "Wouldn't sit right leaving you to fend off more like them." For the first time that day, she smiled, faintly but real. "Then I'll take the company, Mr. Avery." He tipped his hat again. "Colt'll do just fine." They hitched his horse to the back of the wagon and set off down the trail. As the sun dipped lower, painting the land in amber light, the desert stretched wide and unforgiving. But for the first time in days, Clara didn't feel alone. The silence between them wasn't heavy anymore. It was steady, calm, the kind that meant trust was forming in the dust and wind. As night crept in, they made camp by a dry creek bed. Colt gathered wood, his movements precise and quiet. Clara tended the small fire, her face flickering in the glow. Neither spoke much, but when their eyes met across the flames, there was an understanding. Two souls crossing paths when fate decided to test them both. Later, as she lay awake beneath the stars, Clara glanced at the cowboy resting against his saddle, hat pulled low. Who was he really? What ghosts rode behind him? She didn't know, but she sensed his loneliness, the kind that only the Wild West could carve into a man's heart. When she finally closed her eyes, she whispered a quiet thank you to the night. She didn't know what awaited them beyond the ridge, but something told her that Colt Avery's gun wasn't done talking, and neither was their story. Morning came slow over the desert, brushing gold and rose across the horizon. A cold wind swept through the canyon, whispering over the ashes of last night's fire. Clara Hale stirred beneath her blanket, her eyes blinking open to find Colt Avery already awake, saddling his horse with quiet precision. The man looked like he hadn't slept at all, eyes steady, jaw tight, the way someone looks when they're used to danger never staying gone for long. "Coffee's still warm," Clara said softly, motioning to the small tin pot near the coals. He gave a small nod. "Appreciate it." He poured himself a cup, taking a slow sip as his eyes scanned the horizon. "We'll need to make it to Red Rock by sundown if we want to beat the storm coming." "From the north." She glanced up at the cloudless sky. "Storm? Looks clear to me." Colt smiled faintly beneath his hat. "That's the trouble with the desert, Miss Hale. She never tells you what's coming till it's already here." They hitched the wagon and set off, the wheels creaking through the dirt, the wind humming low through the canyons. For hours the world stretched silent around them, cliffs carved by time, sun beating down hard, and the endless cry of hawks circling above. Clara felt herself slowly relaxing, though a part of her stayed on edge. Outlaws didn't just vanish. She turned to Colt. "Those men from yesterday, you think they'll come back?" He didn't answer right away. His gaze stayed on the trail ahead, jaw tightening just slightly. If they had a smart leader, no. But the one with the scar, he wasn't the kind that forgets being beaten. Clara frowned. "You knew him?" "Not personally," Colt said. "But I've heard the name. Jeb Carver. Used to run with a gang down by the Rio Grande. They robbed trains, burned a town once. Thought he was dead till yesterday." Her heart sank. "So he's alive." Colt nodded grimly. "And he'll come looking to even the score." They traveled in tense silence after that. The sun climbed high, baking the earth, turning every breath into dust. Clara could see the faint outline of Red Rock Ridge in the distance, jagged cliffs standing like sentinels against the sky. Safety felt close, but danger always felt closer. By late afternoon, they reached a narrow pass lined with tall rock walls. The wagon's wooden wheels echoed through the canyon, the sound bouncing back in hollow repetition. Colt slowed his horse uneasy. "Too quiet," he muttered. Before Clara could speak, the echo of hoofbeats thundered from behind, louder, faster, multiplying. Her blood went cold. Colt spun his horse around, hand flying to his revolver. From the shadows at the canyon's mouth rode 4 men, dust swirling around them. And in front, alive, smirking, with that same cruel scar cutting across his cheek, rode Jeb Carver. "Well, I'll be damned," Carver called out, grinning wide. "The lady and the hero. Didn't expect to see you so soon, Cowboy." Colt's voice was calm, but his hand never left his gun. "You should have stayed gone, Carver." Carver laughed, his men spreading out to block the pass. "And miss a reunion like this? Not a chance. You killed 2 of mine yesterday. I reckon that makes us even only when I take 2 back. Your lives for theirs." Clara's fingers tightened on the reins, the mare shifting nervously beneath her. Colt moved his horse slightly forward, placing himself between her and the gang. "Carver," he said evenly, "there's still time to turn that horse around and live to ride another day." But Carver's grin only widened. "You talk big for a man outnumbered 4-1. Colt's eyes didn't waver. "I've seen worse odds." Then in a flash, everything exploded. Gunfire cracked through the air, echoing like thunder between the canyon walls. Clara ducked low in the wagon, bullets splintering the wood beside her. Colt's revolver barked 3 sharp shots. One outlaw tumbled from his saddle. Another cried out as a bullet grazed his arm. Carver and his last man took cover behind a boulder, firing blindly. "Get the woman!" Carver shouted. Clara's pulse pounded. She reached for her father's old rifle lying beside her, hands shaking, breath ragged. When she peeked over the wagon's edge, she saw one of the bandits circling around from the side, sneaking closer. Without thinking, she raised the rifle, aimed as her father had taught her, and pulled the trigger. The shot rang true. The outlaw dropped his gun and fell hard into the dust. Clara froze, staring at what she'd done, but there was no time to think. Carver shouted in rage, standing up to fire again. But Colt's bullet struck the rock inches from his face, showering him in dust. "You ain't leaving here alive, Avery." Carver roared, his voice echoing. Colt's tone was steady as stone. "Neither are you." The fight raged for what felt like hours. The sound of gunfire, bouncing across the canyon. The smell of gunpowder thick in the air. Clara reloaded, her fingers trembling, passing bullets to Colt when his revolver clicked empty. Their movements became wordless, practiced, instinctive, like 2 souls moving in rhythm against death itself. Finally, there was silence. Smoke drifted upward, fading into the harsh sunlight. 3 men lay still in the dirt. Only Carver remained, crouched behind the boulder, breathing hard. Colt stepped forward, gun raised. "It's over, Carver. Drop it." The outlaw's laugh was low and ragged. "You think you're some kind of savior, Cowboy? You think killing me makes you clean?" Colt's expression didn't change. "No, but it'll make the road safer for her." For a long moment they stood locked in a stare, one man representing chaos, the other silent justice. Then Carver moved fast. His hand shot up, his revolver gleaming, but Colt was faster. 1 shot. The sound rolled like thunder. And when the smoke cleared, Jeb Carver lay motionless in the dust. The desert went still again. The fight was done. Clara let out a shaky breath, lowering her rifle. Her ears rang, her hands were numb, but she was alive. Colt holstered his revolver and walked over, checking the wagon. "You all right?" he asked softly. She nodded, though tears glistened at the corners of her eyes. I shot a man." Colt's gaze softened. "You did what you had to. Don't let it haunt you. Out here it's survival. Nothing more." For a while neither spoke. The sun dipped low behind the cliffs, painting everything in red and gold, the color of endings and maybe beginnings. They buried the bodies beneath the canyon wall, marking the graves with small stones. Clara watched silently as Colt said a few quiet words, not for the outlaws, but for peace. He moved like a man who'd done this too many times before. When they climbed back onto the wagon, the road ahead seemed endless but clearer somehow. The danger had passed, yet a strange heaviness lingered between them, the weight of what they'd survived together. As they neared Red Rock Ridge, Clara broke the silence. "You've done this before," she said quietly. "Fought men like that." Colt looked ahead. "Yeah, used to wear a badge once. Sheriff down in Calhoun County. Till a job went wrong. My partner got killed, and I quit. Swore I'd never draw my gun again. Not till yesterday." Clara studied him, understanding dawning in her eyes. "You saved me. You saved both of us." He gave a faint, weary smile. "Maybe I was saving myself too." By the time they reached her land, the sky had turned deep purple, stars beginning to pierce the dark. Red Rock Ridge rose like a fortress of fire-colored stone, and the sight took Clara's breath away. "It's beautiful," she whispered. Colt helped her down from the wagon. "Your father would have been proud," he said. She turned to him, smiling softly. "You could stay a while." "Colt, there's work to be done. A cabin to build, fences to mend. I could use the help." He looked out at the land, then at her. For the first time, the road didn't seem so lonely. "Maybe I will," he said finally. "The West don't often give second chances. Maybe it's time I take one." As the night settled around them, a small fire flickered to life near the wagon. The wind was cool, carrying the scent of sage and new beginnings. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote howled, a reminder that danger still roamed the wild. But for now, peace had found them. Clara sat beside the fire, her eyes on the horizon. Colt rested his hat beside him, leaning back against the wagon wheel. They didn't need words. The silence said everything: gratitude, respect, and the quiet spark of something more. The stars burned bright above Red Rock Ridge that night, like watchful eyes guarding over them. And as the firelight danced across their faces, the legend of the cowboy who rode in with his gun drawn began to spread, whispered by travelers carried by the wind. In the wild heart of the frontier, where every dawn brought a new fight, Colt Avery and Clara Hale had carved their names into the dust, a story of courage, redemption, and the kind of partnership only born from surviving the impossible.